We will just go on to the second contribution this morning by Gavin D'Costa, The Case for a Catholic Theological Affirmation of Israel. Gavin, come to the forefront.
Catholic theology today has come to a crossroads, or some might say a cliff edge. At Vatican II, in the Doctrine Lumen Gentium, paragraph 16, and Nostra Aetate, paragraph 4, the Church insisted the Jewish covenant made by God is irrevocable. This is what Paul says in Romans 11:29 about biblical Judaism. In 1980, Pope St. John Paul took the further step of identifying the biblical Judaism of Nostra Aetate, not only with the Church's own roots, but also with post-biblical rabbinic Judaism, even though that identification raises intriguing problems. Today's Judaism is seen as in a covenant relationship with God for the gifts, promises, and callings made by God to the Jews are irrevocable. So far, so magisterial. What does this mean regarding those specific promises and gifts? More precisely, what does this mean regarding the land promises to the Jewish nation that saturates what Catholics call the Old Testament? Is that gift still valid? Addressing this question in a tense Middle East is difficult. Muslims, Middle Eastern Catholics, and Christians and other Christian churches, and of course the Jewish people, all have an investment in the question, and all are dear to Catholics. Given the politics, the theological question might merit a roadblock. But theology should not be a hostage to politics, but to God's revelation. God's revelation demands justice and peace. Thus, in everything that follows, please take for granted that I fully support the Holy See's fundamental agreements of 2000 with the PLO and the Holy See's recognition of the Palestinian state in 2015. These are clearly non-negotiable. I should also declare I hold what I call soft supersessionist viewpoint, by which I mean that Jesus Christ is the Messiah and the fulfillment of the promises made to Israel. But this does not eradicate the God-given status of the covenant with the Jewish people or the promises made to them. And aligning these two claims is part of the tightrope walk for post-conciliar Catholicism. Little break from the text, so you can look at me, is to say that the issue of Messianic Jews understood in the way of Mark Kinzer's type of Messianic Judaism, and Messianic Jews who exist within actually Gentile churches, I take Antoine's form here, become very important intersects to this question, because in a sense they are Jews, no question about that, although I know David expressed some reservation about Gentile Catholics deciding who were Jews, but anyway, these two groups are Jews, and then the question becomes, since they accept that Jesus is the Messiah, does that change this status? Okay, so it's a bit complicated to untangle, but I've decided to focus just in this way. Okay, back to the text. You can look down again. So the case for theologically affirming Israel with qualifications. My argument has 3 steps, and I, of course, simplify. First, what does the Old Testament say about the land? Second, what does the New Testament say about the land promises? And third, how do these teachings relate to the founding of Israel starting 1948? Step 1. The Old Testament is rich with different themes related to the land. 70% of references when covenant is mentioned are linked explicitly to the promise of the land. Amidst this complexity, there are three indisputable elements. The first is God's promise to the land to Abraham and his descendants, which we find in Genesis 12, 15, 17. The Jewish people are not chosen because of the land. Key figures like Moses never enter the land. They're hardly less Jewish for it. The people existed first. The boundaries of the land are drawn differently. In Genesis 15, 18 to 21 depicts the largest area. Smaller but varying borders are depicted in Deuteronomy 11, Numbers 34, Ezekiel 47, Exodus 23, and within Deuteronomy again in 7. Now, scholars dispute whether these are boundaries fixed by God in the narratives or territory related to historical context and existing political conditions to facilitate a home for the people. Regarding boundaries, borders, recall Genesis 13, verses 5 to 13. A dispute arises between Lot and Abram over the land. Abram offers Lot first choice of the land so that the dispute may be resolved amicably. Lot chooses the finest portion and Abram is content. Peace and justice at Abram's cost have been restored. Now, the concern for the stranger in the land as a theme occurs 36 times, often accompanied with the contextual explanation of why this is so important, and I quote, "You know the feeling of a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Exodus 23, verse 9. I should make clear that I'm not thinking of the Palestinians in the modern context as strangers to the land. Second, Israel's gift of the land from God also requires from his people a moral and cultic purity. This is found in a number of biblical passages. And one aspect of moral purity requires treating the stranger justly. The biblical narrative shows the people consistently fall away from this high calling. Becoming the people is a process with a lot of messiness and no easy linear trajectory. As Catholics, we should have some sympathy, given that in Lumen Gentium we are called to be the spotless spouse of the spotless Lamb. The failure of Catholics to live up to this high standard does not mean we condemn the call and the vocation and the gift. Third, lest the unconditional gift and the process of becoming God's people become a cause of complacency, Leviticus 18:28 contains a stark warning. If you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. This is key for why Catholics cannot see the modern return. I say Catholics, I'm really talking about myself, okay, but I'm proposing this to Catholics. This is key for why Catholics cannot see the modern return of the Jewish people as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy regarding the end times. That presumes to make a judgment only God can make. I have not touched upon a wide range of issues: the destruction of the inhabitants of the land, the Herim, the place of the temple, the role of Jerusalem. My initial conclusion, supported by a range of Catholic exegetes, is that the land promise made to Israel is central to the idea of the promises and gifts made by God to his people. Is it possible to avoid a supersessionist reading of the Old Testament while keeping intact the Church's Christological centre in the New Testament? So to turn to the second step, In the New Testament, the church is never called the New Israel. In the 80 usages of Israel, it usually refers to the Jewish people or their polity or to the land directly. There are 3 New Testament themes that are important. First, Jesus is entirely committed to the land and the Jewish people. Jesus orients his ministry in relation to the land, both at the beginning and end of his ministry. The birth narratives enact the people's exile in Egypt, followed by the homely family's return to the land from Egypt in Matthew 2, 13 to 23. During Jesus' ministry, he never leaves the land. He's only concerned with Israel, his people. Going to the ends of the earth is left to the church gathered around him after the resurrection. This conforms to the expectations regarding the arrival of a Jewish Messiah, who will be a light to the nations. Jesus will make Israel, the people and the land, a light to the nations, so that all will worship Israel's God. Second, many of Jesus' teachings focus on the land. Take, for instance, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth," from Matthew 5. Many biblical scholars argue it is better rendered, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the land." Matthew was drawing on Psalm 37:11. In that psalm, the Hebrew eretz refers to the land of Israel, not the world. 4 other verses in Psalm 37 repeat the phrase, "inherit the land," with the land of Israel as the clear referent. This would mean that his Jewish disciples would eventually inherit the land in the renewal of all things. Third, after the resurrection in Acts 1:6, Jesus responds affirmatively to the question regarding the restoration of the kingdom to Israel. But he also warns the disciples that the exact timing of this event is not for you to know. It is the Father's initiative. Any Jewish listener, and all the disciples were Jewish in the narrative, would know this reference is to the land. Mark's book that he's already mentioned, Jerusalem Crucified, Jerusalem Risen, offers a close exegetical reading of the New Testament on this very theme, showing that Acts and Luke are centrally structured around the importance of the land. Fourth, the focus on the land is not confined to Jesus alone. St. Paul cites the land gift in Acts 13:19 as part of his recalling God's mighty acts, culminating but not finishing in Jesus Christ. It is the same Paul who also in Romans 11:29 says, "These gifts are irrevocable." For any Jewish reader, it would be clear that one of these gifts is the land. It is, after all, the secondary focus of the covenantal gift, after the primary one, the creation of a people. All these and many other passages point to one thing. The earlier followers of Jesus knew that the land was central to the gospel, both in its promise to the Jewish people and its relationship to a messianic restoration. But of course the New Testament is complex, as it reconfigures the Old messianically. If the land promise is not consigned to replacement theology, we must ask whether the restoration of the land to the people of Israel should be considered an eschatological sign of Jesus' return. I didn't know Mark's paper prior to coming here, so congratulations to the organisers for this nice dovetailing of the papers. It is difficult to deny that this might be the case. Only God knows. This is not an evasion or, as we say, a cop-out. However, we cannot know the hour and must, as Jesus tells us, remain diligent, discerning the signs. Finally, what of the New Testament references that seem to move away from the particularity of the land and universalize the kingdom? For example, the location of the transgeographical temple is the risen body of Christ. Jesus says he will rebuild the temple, which is his risen body, John 2:19. Now, this universalist movement in the New Testament, leading to the cosmic Christ, remains grounded in the particular. the historical Jesus of Nazareth. The particular is the gate to the universal. The universal does not dematerialize or destroy the particular. So just as Jesus Christ is the scandal of particularity, so I propose is the land and the Jewish people, both of which he is formed by. When the Pontifical Biblical Commission in 2001 inspected this question, they acknowledged differing traditions regarding the significance of the land in the New Testament for Christians. This question is genuinely not resolved. However, the section treating the New Testament interestingly ends, and I quote, "It should not be forgotten, however, that a specific land was promised by God to Israel and received as a heritage." I'm suggesting one way in which we might take that Christologically seriously without departicularizing the promise of the land, not slipping into a relativist position that both Judaism and Christianity are true as they stand, which I do not think is possible to hold. So my tentative conclusion so far is A, that the promises of the Jewish people regarding the land can be read as intact. B, that those promises are reconfigured in Jesus Christ, but not in a way that dematerializes the land promised to the Jewish people. And C, that the land promised to the Jewish people may well be related to eschatology, something that is an open question. So, all of that, does this apply to Israel 1948 and the following? And of course, it may be no at this point, but let's have a look. 3 qualifications regarding the phrase modern Israel. I hereby denote, in using this, the Jewish people living upon the land, not the form of nation state or any particular political party that may run that state or its prudential judgments. It goes without saying that some form of government is required for the safety and security of the Jewish people in the land. But I take the form of governance to be a contingent factor. The promise to the Jewish people is not. Second, I keep with the Catholic Church's affirmation of the 1947 UN boundaries when speaking about Israel. And third, the Palestinian claims regarding their homeland are intractable, and that should not go out of focus in what follows. My sole question now is whether the biblical promises might relate to Israel 1948 onwards in terms of people and land, not in support of any government or particular forms of governance. First, if there is an ingathering of Jews to the land, which is certainly the case, this may be God's providential action. Could modern Israel be the beginning of the end days? Can this even be considered when so much darkness and tragedy surround the early days of Israel, when murder, destruction, and dispossession are also part of the story? Attention to Jesus' teaching require modesty about confidently declaring this to be the case. Close attention to the biblical promises reinforces reticence. The people may be vomited out. It has happened before. We cannot force God's hand or prematurely declare this is the fulfillment of Scripture. This may be a return, not the return. But the ingathering of the Jewish people and their preservation as a people is deeply biblical and cannot be ignored. In Pope St. John Paul II's 1991 pastoral visit to Brazil, the Pope met with Jewish leaders in Brasilia. In his speech, he cites from Ezekiel 34:13, employing the Old Testament to read modern history, employing a passage central to the land promise. And I quote, "May our Jewish brothers and sisters who have been led out from amongst the people and gathered from the foreign lands, brought back to their own country, to the land of their ancestors, be able to live there in peace and security on the mountains of Israel." guarded by the protection of God, their true shepherd. End quote. If that gathering was the initiative of secular Zionists with the support of evangelical British Christians, it does not seem to matter. That the Pope interprets this ingathering biblically does matter. Second, as I have said repeatedly, justice for the Palestinians is non-negotiable. Justice for all plays a thundering role throughout both the Old and New Testament. Justice is central to Catholic social teachings and grounded in revelation, not modernity's politics. The Catholic Church has a long history of supporting the Palestinian peoples, and this must continue. The American and European churches' concerns cannot be played off the Middle Eastern churches. Both Palestinians and Jews have a case. Both sides make a demand related to biblical truth, one regarding the land promise, one regarding that justice be exercised. Both claims are a demand on the church. Pope Francis, in his speech during Mohammed Abbas and Shimon Peres' Peace for Prayer visit in the Vatican in 2014, said, "Peacemaking calls for courage, much more so than warfare. It calls for the courage to say yes to encounter and no to conflict, yes to dialogue and no to violence." Whether the result of conversation would be a two-state solution, a single binational federation agreement, or one of the many other models floated is a prudential judgment best reached by the parties involved at the very least. Third, Catholics do not affirm nation states as God-given. Zionism has often been configured, falsely, as an underwriting of a nation state created by God. Christian Zionists, like Pat Robertson, in effect say, if you oppose Israel, you oppose God. This is to problematically conflate the people, the land, and the modern nation state of Israel as indivisible. There are two serious objections to this way of construing matters, one historical and one theological. Historically, Zionism never had a single view of the nation state. Chomsky's book, Beyond the Nation State, shows how mainstream Zionist leaders envisage the future Jewish state in Palestine as either binational or part of a larger multinational framework. This was true of Leon Pinsker, Vladimir Jablonski, Theodor Herzl, Ahad Aham, and David Ben-Gurion. After 1948, historians wrote a different, more teleological story, and Zionism continued in its many manifestations. Further, amongst contemporary Jewish Zionists, many are deeply critical of the actions of the Jewish nation state. There is no question that there must be some form of governance for the people in the land, but it does not mean that a God-given form is the current nation state. Theologically, Emeritus Pope Benedict wrote in 2018, I think wisely on our topic. He wrote, and I quote, "The question of what to make of the Zionist project was also controversial for the Catholic Church. From the beginning, however, the dominant position was that a theologically understood acquisition of the land in the sense of a new political messianism was unacceptable. After the establishment of Israel as a country in 1948, a theological doctrine emerged that eventually enabled the political recognition of the State of Israel by the Vatican. At its core is the conviction that a strictly theological understood state, a Jewish faith state, Glaubensstaat, that would view itself as the theological and political fulfillment of the promises is unthinkable within history according to Christian faith and contrary to the Christian understanding of the promises. Now, I think they're very good grounds for Emeritus Pope Benedict's rejection. Catholics could not underwrite Jewish political messianism because it has no authority to do so. Catholics could object in so much as it conflicts with Catholic claims that the Messiah has come in Jesus Christ. Catholics could not underwrite the formation of any nation state that claims an unalloyed identity with God's actions, implied by the notion of fulfillment of God's promises. God's fulfillment has come in Jesus Christ, not in a nation state. Now, the fact that the Vatican is a state does not contradict the points I'm making. But Emeritus Pope Benedict did not probe further in this important essay of his as to other possible configurations that could be supported by Catholic theology. Above, in the paper, I have been suggesting one such way of configuration. However, the Emeritus Pope seems to recognize the point I am making, because almost immediately after the quote just cited, he continues, and I quote again, "The Vatican has recognized the state of Israel as a modern constitutional state and sees it as the legitimate home of the Jewish people, the rationale of which cannot be derived directly from Holy Scripture, yet, in another sense, it expresses God's faithfulness to the people of Israel." End quote. Now, this final sentence stands in creative tension with the first sentence. How can the state of Israel express God's faithfulness to his people, yet that very claim not somehow be derived from Scripture? Now, it's probably because this is actually indirect derivation. Israel 1948 does not exist as an object of biblical revelation or a datum in the Bible. So if we distinguish, as I have done, the state from the people in the land, might it then make sense to speak of God's faithfulness to the people of Israel? I believe so. And here I would claim the support of Pope Benedict in doing so. So the way forward through this genuine tension is surely to decouple the people in the land, indirectly affirmed in the Bible, from the nation state, which is not affirmed. Admittedly, some form of positive affirmation of the need of governance for people must be conceded, but not granted theological status itself. Catholic theology cannot underwrite which form of governance is best. So the fourth and final step, and of course this is too quick and this is really the contents of our conference. If I'm right in my argument, what are the implications for the Catholic Church's support of Catholic Jews who wish to undertake Aliyah? The question of its duties to Messianic Jews is a different logical question, but given that they still have the status of Jews in the Catholic Church's eyes, I don't think the answer is different. But I just think I don't have the legitimacy to speak outside of the Catholic context right now. If I am right in my argument, I think the implications of the Catholic Church is to support Catholic Jews who wish to undertake Aliyah. This relates to the important Israel Supreme Court decision regarding Oswald Rafeisen, the Catholic friar sometimes known as Brother Daniel, whose Jewishness was uncontested, but his status as an apostate became determinant in his refusal by the High Court. And this issue has been revived by a friend of ours at this conference in an op-ed in the Times of Israel, and I give you the link there. I state the issue rather than in any way addressing it here, but this is part of the questions that unfold themselves. So I finish on a personal note. When I began this research some 13 years ago in this area, I was a strong supporter of the Palestinians and viewed Israel as a colonialist power with no legitimacy in the region. Theology has pushed me to reconsider and change my view, but without undermining my support and continuity with the Palestinian people. Catholics are called to attend to Revelation first and foremost. By not addressing the question of the land, the Catholic Church will not be attentive to Revelation. Its silence should not replicate previous silences regarding the Jewish people. Thank you.